Working. Hopefully I'm up to this. I'm learning how to manage this, I think. I'm not really interested, I suppose, in slowing down, although it has been a bit much in the last year and a half. I do better in some ways when I'm working flat out. So, yeah, I thought about it, but I've decided against it. There are times in your life where it's not time to slow down, it's time to become more efficient. That's the thing, you can become so efficient. You end up doing things in 5 minutes that would otherwise take you a week. As you take on more responsibilities and you determine that you're going to become more efficient, the responsibility pushes the efficiency. What do they say too? There's time enough to sleep when you're in the grave.
Analysis of the purpose of memory. People think that the purpose of memory is to remember the past. And that's not the purpose of memory. The purpose of memory is to extract out from the past lessons to structure the future. Lessons to structure the future. So you're done with a memory when you've extracted out the information that you can use to guide yourself properly in the future. Done with a memory when you've extracted out the information that you can use to guide yourself properly in the future. Done with a memory when you've extracted out the information that you can use to guide yourself properly in the future. Done with a memory when you've extracted out the information that you can use to guide yourself properly in the future. So if you have a traumatic memory, for example, it's really obsessing you. If you analyze that memory to the point where you figured out how you put yourself at risk and you can determine how you might avoid that in the future, then the emotion associated with that goes away. Memory has a very pragmatic function. And cultural memory is the same thing. We need to extract out stories from our past that structure our future. And we need that because, well, first of all, if you don't have a purpose, it isn't that your life becomes neutral in a meaningless sense. It's that your life becomes characterized by unbearable suffering. Because the baseline condition of life is something like unbearable suffering. Is something like unbearable suffering. And what you have to set against that is a noble and worthwhile purpose. A noble and worthwhile purpose. Hopefully, your determination of that purpose is buttressed to some degree by the wisdom of the past, because you can't conjure something like that up on your own. And if you provide people with nobility of purpose, then they can tolerate the suffering of existence without becoming entirely corrupted by it. And cultures that don't do that, it isn't even so much that they die, it's that cultures that don't do that are dead. They're done. They don't have a story anymore. And they don't have a call to adventure. And then, well, then everyone suffers stupidly as a consequence. It's a very bad thing. Bring the story forward and propagate it. And make it the most noble possible story. And then you motivate people to transcend themselves, which they need to do. People people think of freedom as the ability to implement your whim. And freedom opens up that as a possibility. But sustainable freedom, that isn't what it's about at all. It's primarily about responsibility. It's about determining which load you're going to pick up and carry. That's the proper definition of appropriate freedom. It's not dim gratification of instantaneous impulse. It's self-evident that that doesn't work. 2-year-olds do that. And that's why they can't live in the world. They can't organize themselves across time. They can't sacrifice the moment for the future. And the more sophisticated you get, I suppose, in some sense, the more you're able to do that. And then your freedom becomes the freedom to choose the proper responsibility. That's also not something that we've been good at communicating to young people. If we talk to them about responsibility, we generally do it in a finger-wagging sort of way. It's like, well, you're breaking the rules, you're a bad person. And well, that may be true. The proper message for young people is to say, well, no, you don't understand. You want to take on responsibility. You want to take on the heaviest load that you can conceive of, that you might be able to move, because it gives your life nobility and purpose. And that offsets the tragedy, offsets the tragedy, offsets the tragedy, offsets the tragedy. And not only psychologically, because you have a purpose and something to wake up for, to face the difficulties of the day, but also because if you face the difficulties of the day properly, you actually ameliorate suffering, not only in the psychological sense, but because you make the world at least a less terrible place. And that's something. And that's something. Right? To move things away from hell is something. To move things away from the worst they can be is, well, that's a noble goal in and of itself.
There's a lot of really good things going on in the world. We have poverty, absolute poverty, between the year 2000 and 2012. Hundreds of thousands of people are being connected to the power grid every day. Fresh water is available not to fewer and fewer people, but to more and more people. That's happening extremely rapidly. Starvation in India and China is a thing completely of the past. You never hear about that. But that's pretty much the case for the rest of the world, except now and then for political reasons. You know, everybody's got a cell phone, and anybody who doesn't is going to have one in the next 10 years. And that puts in people's hands a degree of communication and access that would have been absolutely incomprehensible even 15 years ago. All these good things are happening. And just concentrating on this polarization process that seems to have gripped us in the West seems counterproductive given all those good things that are going on in the background. Now, that doesn't make what's going on in the West trivial, but it does set it inside a much more positive context, so that's something to keep in mind.
Freedom of speech. The right to freedom of speech is central because it's the right by which you defend all the other rights. Well, that's why the idea of logos in the West is the most sacred concept. Christ, think about this psychologically, Christ is the ideal of perfection. This is independent of any religious discussion or any historical accuracy. It doesn't matter. What Christ represents is the perfect individual. Whatever that is. Now, you discuss endlessly what that is, but one of the things the West has settled on is that the perfect individual utters the truthful speech that makes potential into habitable order. Does that through truth. That's embedded in the first few sentences of Genesis, for example. God brings the world into being. And the idea that that truthful speech that brings the world into being from formless potential also characterizes each person. That's our fabrication in the image of God. That's the idea of the West. It's an unbelievably remarkable idea that perfection, individual perfection, is to be found in the relationship with spoken truth. God, That's the great idea. Well, it's out of that arises the observation that there's nothing more central to the hierarchy of rights and obligations as well, let's say, than freedom of speech. Yes, it's absolutely central. That's why Christ is the Word made flesh. The idea is that the perfect individual is the person who speaks truth, but also acts out the truth of those words. It's a proposition whose merit is virtually self-evident when you understand it in that manner. So yeah, to see assaults on freedom of speech, especially compelled speech, well, that's where I drew the line in my life. It's like, that is the West. It's logocentric. If you want to take the West down, you remove the idea of the divine word from the substructure of the society. So you have to do that. It's like, and this is the level at which this war is being fought. It's fundamentally a theological war.
Question?
I'm married young and have had only one sexual partner. Now I desire variety, but value my marriage and will not cheat. Any insight on overcoming this conflict? As a matter of fact, yes, I would say get the variety with your partner. You know, there's lots of games you can play to spice up your sexual life. Buy some lingerie, like buy 100 pieces. You know, buy whatever you need that you might want to experiment with. You have to introduce that spirit of pretend play that you had when you were a little kid into your sexual life, and then you have many partners in the same person. Put some thought into it. Sex is a domain in which expertise can be developed just like any other domain. Some of that's play and fantasy play, some of it's sexual technique. And I guess then the other thing I would say is take stock of each other and see if there are things that you could do in your life that would make you more attractive to one another. You know, those are hard questions because no one wants to say, well, you know, I'd be more attracted to my wife sexually if she just acted X way. And the same with regards to a wife's contemplation of her husband, but those are the real questions, man. If your partner isn't acting in a manner that is sexually attractive, then either there's something wrong with you or there's something wrong with them. Those harsh judgments that your sexual attraction makes are also very useful ways of orienting yourself towards proper behavior in the world. Admit to the variety that you want and see to what degree you can fulfill that within the confines of the marriage. It's also part of coming into contact with the shadow, I would say, if you want to look at it from a Jungian perspective. You might have all sorts of sexual desires that part of you feels should remain taboo. And maybe they should. I'm not suggesting absolute sexually libertine behavior. Maybe they should. I know sexuality has to be regulated very carefully. You might be able to push yourself with some time and effort and contemplation and some admission of fantasy and all of that into domains of sexual satisfaction that you haven't achieved before. I try to do this in my therapeutic practice. I try to do this all the time. I want the best for what wants the best in you. It's like that part, I'm that part's friend.
It's like, I don't have unconditional positive regard. I am not on the side of you that's aiming at your defeat. I'm not at all on that side. I'm on the side of you that's struggling towards the light, right? And I'm on the side of that part of me. At least I'm trying to be on the side of that. And that's the definition of love. And that's the definition of love, I believe. Because what it means is, but I said it. I truly want the best for what wants the best in you. Yeah. And people love that. They love that, man. I'm trying to figure out what's the best for us. Really, the best. Not the best for me, although that's part of it, because here I am, you know, and I'm in the game too. I'm so greedy, let's say. I don't just want the best for me. That's not enough for me. I'm too greedy for that. Maybe I'm too selfish for that. I want the best for me in a way that's the best for everyone else too. Because that's even better. That's another interesting thing about being bounded by death. You have nothing to lose. You might as well aim for the highest goal, because what have you got to lose that you aren't already going to lose? Nothing. Nothing. And you have everything, hypothetically, to gain. If you want to go to university and become a physician, there's a lot of sacrifice of impulsive gratification that goes along with that. But if you become a physician, then it's a noble enterprise, people support you socially, and all of the needs that you need to have fulfilled will also be fulfilled by that enterprise. Well, that's a way better model. Well, that's a way better model. It's strange that the maximum freedom comes with the adoption of a discipline and then also the adoption of responsibility. That frees you up and everyone else around you in the long run. And if you explain that to people, especially in this day and age when they've been fed a never-ending diet of idiot rights and freedoms, they're immediately on board with it because they know that most of the meaning that people experience in their life is a consequence of adopting responsibility. Adopting responsibility. So they're starving for that. They're starving for that. They're starving for that. The idea to be articulated. It's as if something like the following happened as humanity developed. First were the endless tens or hundreds of thousands of years prior to the emergence of written history and drama. During this time, the twin practices of delay and exchange begin to emerge slowly and painfully. Then they become represented in metaphorical abstraction as rituals and tales of sacrifice, told in a manner such as this. It's as if there's a powerful figure in the sky who sees all and is judging you. Giving up something you value seems to make him happy, and you want to make him happy because all hell breaks loose if you don't. So, practice sacrificing and sharing until you become expert at it, and things will go well for you. No one said any of this, at least not so plainly and directly, but it was implicit in the practice and then in the stories.
Shit is wow.
Action came first, as it had to, as the animals we once were could act, but could not think. People watched the successful succeed and the unsuccessful fail for thousands and thousands of years. We thought it over and drew a conclusion. The successful among us delayed gratification. The successful among us bargain with the future. A great idea begins to emerge, taking ever more clearly articulated form, ever more clearly articulated stories. What's the difference between the successful and the unsuccessful? the successful sacrifice. Things get better as the successful practice their sacrifice. The questions become increasingly precise and simultaneously broader. What is the greatest possible sacrifice for the greatest possible good? And the answers become increasingly deeper and profound. The God of Western tradition, like so many gods, requires sacrifice. But sometimes he goes even further. He demands not only sacrifice, but the sacrifice of precisely what is loved best. We'll start our analysis with a truism. Stark, self-evident, and understated. Sometimes things do not go well. That seems to have much to do with the terrible nature of the world, with its plagues and famines and tyrannies and betrayals. But here's the rub. Sometimes when things are not going well, it's not the world that's the cause. The cause is instead that which is currently most valued, subjectively and personally. Why? Because the world is revealed to an indeterminate degree through the template of your values. Thus, if the world you're seeing is not the world you want, it's time to examine your values. It's time to rid yourself of your current presuppositions. It's time to let go. It might even be time to sacrifice what you love best so that you can become who you might become instead of staying who you are. Something valuable given up ensures future prosperity. Something valuable sacrificed pleases the Lord. What is most valuable and best sacrificed? Or what is at least emblematic of that? A choice cut of meat, the best animal in a flock, a most valued possession. What's above even that? What constitutes the ultimate sacrifice for the gain of the ultimate prize? It's a close race between child and self. The sacrifice of the mother offering her child to the world is exemplified profoundly by Michelangelo's great sculpture, Pieta. Michelangelo crafted Mary cradling the nearly naked body of her adult son, crucified and ruined. It's her fault. It was through her that he entered the world and its great drama of being. Is it right to bring a baby into this terrible world? Every woman asks herself that question. Some say no, and they have their reasons. Mary answers yes, voluntarily, knowing full well what's to come. As do all mothers, if they allow themselves to see. It's an act of supreme courage when it's undertaken voluntarily. In turn, Mary's son, Christ, offers himself to God and the world to betrayal, torture, and death, to the very point of despair on the cross, where he cries out those terrible words, my God, why hast thou forsaken me? That is the archetypal story of the man who gives his all for the sake of the better, who offers up his life for the advancement of being, who allows God's will to become manifest fully within the confines of a single mortal life. That is the model for the honorable man. In Christ's case, however, as he sacrifices himself, God, his Father, is simultaneously sacrificing his Son. It is for this reason that the Christian sacrificial drama of son and self is archetypal. It's a story at the limit where nothing more extreme
Nothing greater can be imagined. That's the very definition of archetype. And that's the core of what constitutes religious. Pain and suffering define the world. Of that, there can be no doubt. Sacrifice can hold pain and suffering in abeyance to a greater or lesser degree. And greater sacrifices can do that more effectively than lesser. Of that, there can be no doubt. Everyone holds this knowledge in their souls. Thus, the person who wishes to alleviate suffering, who wishes to rectify the flaws in being, who wants to bring about the best of all possible futures, who wants to create heaven on earth, will make the greatest of sacrifices, of self and of child, of everything that is love, to live a life aimed at the good. He will forego expediency. He will pursue the path of ultimate meaning, and he will, in that manner, bring salvation to the ever desperate world. Archetypal themes are archetypal because they actually speak of the structure of human experience. That's why they last. And human experience has a pattern. You don't have the capacity to articulate that pattern as an individual, in part because your life is too short. You just can't figure it out. But the ancient representations of those patterns are everywhere around you. You know some of them in image. You cotton onto them automatically. You fall into them if you go to a movie, for example, because movies always express archetypal themes. If you hear them articulated, you think, I knew that. I knew that. I knew that. I knew that. That's the Platonic idea of learning as remembering. Your soul already knows, but it doesn't have the words. And so, when people talk to me about watching my lectures, they say one of two things. A quarter of them say, when I listen to you talk, it's as if you're telling me things that I already know. It's like, yeah, well, that's exactly right, because that's what archetypal stories are. They're the description of what you already know. But that can be articulated, and then who you are and how you see yourself and the way you describe yourself all become the same thing. So that's wonderful. Then you're not at odds with yourself. You're a functioning unity, and that makes you much stronger and more indomitable than you would otherwise be. And then the other thing that people say, and this is more like 3/4 of them, is that they say, I was in a very dark place. I was addicted. I was drinking too much. I had a fragmented relationship with my fiancée, and I wasn't getting married. Things weren't going very well with my family. My relationship with my father was damaged. I didn't have any aim. I was wasting my time. Some variant of that, some combination of those. And they said, well, I've been watching your lectures. I've decided to establish a purpose. I'm trying to tell the truth, and things are way better. Let's say I've done maybe 8 or 9 large-scale public talks in the last 2 months. 20,000 people, and about a third to half of them have stayed afterwards to talk to me, so that's about 7 who have said that to me. And then people stop me on the street all the time and tell me exactly that story, which is just... You can't imagine how good it is to be able to go to places you've never been and to have people stop you on the streets. Look, my life is way better than it was. It's like... It's so good. And I've got like, I don't know, 35,000 letters from people. More than that, I can't keep track. It's exactly the same thing. A quarter of them say, well, you've given me the words to say what I already knew was true, and thank you for that. My father, he's 81. I put him in charge of going through my viewer email.
which is an overwhelming job, but he's overwhelmed by the fact that so many people are writing and saying the same thing. I have a purpose, man. My life actually matters. I finally realized that, and I'm putting it into practice. And I'm bearing up under the heaviest load I can imagine, and it's really helping. Like God, that's tens of thousands of responses now. You couldn't hope for anything better. There's zero harm in it, right? It's just people putting their lives together. They're not mucking about with other people. They're not trying to make broad-scale social transformations about which they have no idea. They're trying to make their immediate environment better, and it's working. A journalist asked me why people are responding so positively to what I'm saying, the young men, for example, and I thought, why? Yeah, that's a good question. Well, I'm actually on their side. I'm really happy that they're not wasting their lives. I'm really sad to see that people are disenchanted and nihilistic and depressed and anxious and aimless and perverse and vengeful and all of those things. It's terrible. And then to see people question whether that's necessary and then to start to rise out of it. It's like, it's so fun. Like last night I was after my talk, it's overwhelming. It's overwhelming. Think about these things, but I was after my talk last night, and so all these people line up. You know, they have their 15 seconds with me, and they're kind of tentative. They're excited and tentative when they come up to talk to me, and then they have, 15 seconds of time to tell me something. I'm really listening to them. They're hesitant about whether or not to share the good news about their life, and I think it's often because when people share good news about their life, people don't necessarily respond positively. They don't get encouragement. And people need so little encouragement. It's just unbelievable. And so they'll tell me something good, and I think, oh, that's so good. Somebody says, oh, I'm getting along way better with my father. I haven't seen him for 10 years, and now we get along. It's like, God, great. Yeah. And then the power of that, you can't overstate the power of that for individuals to get their life together. The individual's an unbelievably powerful force, and every single person who gets their act together a little bit has the capacity to spread that around. 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 It's a chain reaction. It's a chain reaction. It's a chain reaction. Chain reaction. Chain reaction. It's a chain reaction. It's a chain reaction.
Human beings are weird creatures because we're much more activated by having an aim and moving towards it than we are by attainment. And what that means is you have to have an aim, and that means you have to have an interpretation. It also means that the nobler the aim...
The title of these talks that I'm giving here is Mind Over Mind. And I'm going into all the various problems which have to do with the control of the mind. And so I might introduce what I'm going to say by saying it from different points of view. For example, if you're interested in communications, it will be the problem of feedback. Or if I may put it in theological terms, how does man follow the will of God if the will of man is perverse? The theologians say, you cannot do this without having divine grace, or the power to follow the will of God. How then do you get grace? Why is grace given to some and not to others? If I cannot follow the will of God by my own effort because my will is selfish, how will my will, which is selfish, be transformed into an unselfish will. If I cannot do it, because I am already the selfish will, then grace must do it. Then grace must do it. If grace has not already done it, why not? Because I didn't accept it. But by definition, I have no power to accept it because my will was selfish. Must I then become a Calvinist and say that only those people who are predestined to receive grace will be able to live the good life? The good life. Then we come back to the inadmissible position that people who live evil lives do not get grace because they are not predestined to it out of the infinite wisdom of the Godhead. Then God himself must be held responsible for their evil deeds. And so that is a nice little tangle. If I put this in the language of Oriental philosophy and religion, it would be something like this. The Buddha said that wisdom must come only from the abandonment of selfish craving or desire. The Buddha said that wisdom must come only from the abandonment of selfish craving or desire. One who abandons that desire attains nirvana, which is supreme peace, liberation. Nirvana means in Sanskrit, blow out. That is, exhale the breath. Exhale the breath. The opposite, desire, is to breathe in. Now, if you breathe in and hold it, you lose your breath. But if you breathe out, it comes back to you. It comes back to you. The Buddha said that wisdom must come only from the abandonment of selfish craving or desire. The Buddha said that wisdom must come only from the abandonment of selfish craving or desire. So the principle here is, if you want life, don't cling to it. Let go. Let go. But the problem is, if I desire not to desire, is that not already desire? How can I desire not to desire? How can I surrender myself when myself is precisely an urge to hold on, to cling to life, to continue to survive? To survive. To survive. The Buddha said that wisdom must come only from the abandonment of selfish craving desire. The Buddha said that wisdom must come only from the abandonment of selfish craving or desire. I can see rationally that by clinging to myself I may strangle myself. I may be like a person who has a bad habit, as a result of which he is committing suicide. And he knows that, but can't give it up, because the means of death are so sweet. It all comes down to this basic question, that human beings have for a long, long time been concerned about transforming their minds. Is there any way in which one's mind can be transformed? Or is it simply a process which is nothing more than a vicious circle? I could ask, why have you come here? What were you looking for? Why have you come here? What were you looking for? Why have you come here? What were you looking for? Why have you come here? What were you looking for? Would it be too presumptuous of me to say that you were looking for help? That you hoped you would hear somebody who had something to say that would be of help and relevance to you as members of a world which is running into the most intense difficulty. A world beset by a complex of problems, any one of which would be bad enough. But when you add together all the great political, social, and ecological problems with which we are faced, they are appalling. And one naturally says, the reason why we are in such a mess is not simply that we have wrong systems for doing things, whether they be technological, political, or religious, but we have the wrong people. The systems may be all right, but they are in the wrong hands because we are all, in various ways, self-seeking, lacking in wisdom, lacking in courage, afraid of death, afraid of pain, unwilling really to cooperate with others, unwilling to be open to others. And we all think that's too bad. It's me that's wrong. Why have you come here? What were you looking for? Why have you come here? What were you looking for? Why have you come here? What were you looking for? Why have you come here? What were you looking for? It's me that's wrong. It's me that's wrong. I would like to improve. I would like to improve. It's me that's wrong. It's me that's wrong. I would like to improve. I would like to improve. And if only I could be the right person. Is this man going to tell me something that will help me to change myself so that I will be a more creative and cooperative member of the human race? I would like to improve. It's me that's wrong. It's me that's wrong. I would like to improve. I would like to improve. It's me that's wrong. It's me that's wrong. I would like to improve. I would like to improve. So in so many people's minds and from so many different angles, there is this urgent feeling that I must improve me. And this is critically important. Because it's obvious, at least it's superficially obvious, that the way things are, we are going to hell fast. Now in this question, can I improve me? There is the obvious difficulty that if I am in need of improvement, the person who's going to do the improving is the one who needs to be improved. And there immediately we have a vicious circle. It's me that's wrong. It's me that's wrong. I would like to improve. I would like to improve. It's me that's wrong. It's me that's wrong. I would like to improve. I would like to improve. You want grace? Well, ask God, maybe he'll give it to you. theologian will tell you, yes, God gives his grace freely. He gives it to all because he loves all. It's here like the air. All you have to do is receive it. Or a more orthodox, a Catholic Christian would say, all you have to do is to be baptized, to take the holy sacrament of the altar, the bread and wine, the body and blood of Christ, and there is the grace right there. And it's given by these simple physical means so that it's very easily and readily available. Well, a lot of people got baptized, and it doesn't always take. People fall from grace. Why do they? You see, we're just talking about the same old problem, but we've put it a step up. But it's the same problem. How can I improve myself? Was the first problem. The second problem is, do you want grace? Do you want grace? Do you want grace? Do you want grace? How can I accept grace? They're both the same problem. Because you've got to make a move, which will put yourself out of your own control into the control of a better. If you don't believe in the Christian kind of a God, you can believe in the Hindu kind of a God, who is your inner self. You see, you've got a lower self, which you can call your ego. That's that little scoundrelous fellow. He's always out for me. But behind the ego, there is the Atman, the inner self, the inward light, as Quakers would call it, the real self, the spirit, which is substantially identical with God. So you've got to meditate in such a way that you identify with your higher self. How do you do that? Well, you start by watching all your thoughts very carefully, watching your feelings, watching your emotions, so that you begin to build up a sense of separation between the watcher and what is watched. Do you want grace? Do you want grace? Do you want grace? Do you want grace? No longer carried away by your own stream of consciousness. You remain the witness, impassively, impartially, suspending judgment and watching it all go on. That seems to be something like progress. At least you're taking an objective view of what is going on. Of what is going on. You are beginning to be in a position to control it. But just wait a minute. Who is this self behind the self? The watching self. Can you watch that one? It's interesting if you do. Because you find out, of course, that this is just as the problem of grace is nothing more than a transposition of the first problem. How am I to be unselfish? By my own power. It becomes how am I to get grace by my own power. So in the same way, we find that the watching self, or the observing self, behind all our thoughts and feelings, is itself a thought. That is to say, when the police enter a house in which there are thieves, the thieves go up from the ground floor to the first floor. When the police arrive on the first floor, the thieves have gone up to the second, and so to the third, and finally out to the roof. And so when the ego is about to be unmasked, it immediately identifies with the higher self. It goes up a level. Because the religious game is simply a refined and highbrow version of the ordinary game. How can I outwit me? How can I one-up me? So, if I find, for example, that in the quest for pleasure, the ordinary pleasures of the world, food, sex, power, food, sex, power, all this becomes a drag, and I think, no, it isn't there, so I go in for the arts, literature, poetry, music, and I absorb myself in those pleasures, food, sex, power, and I absorb myself in literature, poetry, music, those pleasures, food, sex, power, and I absorb myself in literature, poetry, music, food, sex, power, literature, poetry, music, food, sex, power. And after a while, they aren't the answer. So I go to psychoanalysis. And then I found out that's not the answer. I go to religion. But I'm still seeking what I was seeking when I wanted candy bars. I want to get that goodie. Only I see now that, of course, it's not going to be a material goodie. All material goodies fall apart. But maybe there's a spiritual goodie that's not going to fall apart. But in that quest, the quest is not different from the quest for the candy bar. Same old story. Only you've refined the candy bar, made it abstract and holy and blessed and so on. So it is with the higher self. The higher self's your old ego. And you sure hope it is eternal. Food, sex, power, I absorb myself in literature, poetry, music, those pleasures. Food, sex, power, I absorb myself in literature, poetry, music, those pleasures. Food, sex, power, I absorb myself in literature, poetry, music, those pleasures. Food, sex, power.
Then the great problem is how to get that higher self working. How does it make any difference to what you do and what you think? I know all kinds of people who've got this higher self going, practicing their yoga, but they're just like ordinary people. Sometimes a little worse. And they can fool themselves. Fool themselves. They can fool themselves. They can say, for example,
Well, my point of view in religion is very liberal. I believe that all religions have divine revelation in them. But I don't understand the way you people will fight about it. You fight and say that we, Jehovah's Witnesses, have the real religion. The real religion. Others say, well, we Roman Catholics have it. And the Muslims say, no, it is in the Quran. And this is the right way. 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 And somebody else gets up, and he may be a rather highbrow Catholic, and say, well, God has given the Spirit through all the traditions, but ours is the most refined and mature. And then somebody comes along and says, well, as I said, they're all equally revelations of the divine. And in seeing this, of course, I'm much more tolerant than you are. You see how that game is going to work? See, I could take this position. Supposing you regard me as some sort of a guru, and you know how gurus hate each other. They're always putting each other down. And I could say, well, I don't put other gurus down. See, that outwits all of them. See, we're always doing that. We're always finding a way to be one up. And by the most incredibly subtle means. So you see that, you see? And you say, I realize I'm always doing that. Now tell me, how do I not do that? How do I not do that? This is the right way. This is the right way. This is the right way. How do I not do that? This is the right way. How do I not do that? This is the right way. This is the right way. This is the right way. How do I not do that? This is the right way. How do I not do that? Say, why do you want to know? Well, I'd be better that way. Yeah, but why do you want to be better? Why do you want to be better? Why do you want to be better? You see, the reason you want to be better is the reason why you aren't. We aren't better because we want to be. Because the road to hell is paved with good intentions. Because all the do-gooders in the world, whether they're doing good for others or doing it for themselves, are troublemakers. Troublemakers. On the basis of kindly let me help you or you'll drown, said the monkey, putting the fish safely up a tree. Kindly let me help you or you'll drown, said the monkey, putting the fish safely up a tree. Kindly let me help you or you'll drown, said the monkey, putting the fish safely up a tree. Kindly let me help you or you'll drown, said the monkey, putting the fish safely up a tree. Kindly let me help you or you'll drown, said the monkey, putting the fish safely up a tree. Kindly let me help you or you'll drown, said the monkey, putting the fish safely up a tree. White Anglo-Saxon Protestants, British, German, American, have been on a rampage for the past 100 or more years.
improve the world. We have given the benefits of our culture, our religion, our technology to everybody, except perhaps the Australian Aborigines. And we have insisted that they receive the benefits of our culture, even our political styles, our democracy. You had better be democratic, or we shoot you.
And having conferred these blessings all over the place, we wonder why everybody hates us. See, because sometimes doing good to others, and even doing good to oneself, is amazingly destructive. Because it's full of conceit.
How do you know what's good for other people? How do you know what's good for you? If you say you want to improve, you ought to know what's good for you. But obviously you don't. Because if you did, you would be improved. How do you know what's good for other people? How do you know what's good for you? If you say you want to improve, you ought to know what's good for you. But obviously you don't. Because if you did, you would be improved.
So we don't know. It's like the problem of geneticists, which they face today. I went to a meeting of geneticists not so long ago where they gathered in a group of philosophers and theologians and said, now look here, we need help. We now are on the verge of figuring out how to breed any kind of human character we would want to have. We can give you saints, philosophers, scientists, great politicians, anything you want. Just tell us. What kind of human beings ought we to breed? So, I said, how will those of us who are genetically unregenerate make up our minds what genetically generate people might be? Because I'm afraid very much that our selection of virtues may not work. It may be like, for example, this new kind of high-yield grain, which is becoming ecologically destructive. But when we interfere with the processes of nature and breed efficient plants and efficient animals, there's always some way in which we have to pay for it. And I can well see that eugenically produced human beings might be dreadful. We could have a plague of virtuous people. You realize that? Do you realize that? Any animal considered in itself is virtuous, does its thing, but in crowds they're awful. Like a crowd of ants or locusts on the rampage. They're all perfectly good animals, but it's just too much. I could imagine a perfectly pestiferous mass of 1 million saints.
How do you know what's good for other people? How do you know what's good for you? If you say you want to improve, you ought to know what's good for you. But obviously you don't. Because if you did, you would be improved. How do you know what's good for other people? How do you know what's good for you? If you say you want to improve, you ought to know what's good for you. But obviously you don't. Because if you did, you would be improved.
So I said to these people, look, there's the only thing you can do. Just be sure that a vast variety of human beings is maintained. Don't please breed us down to a few excellent types. Excellent for what? Excellent for what? We never know how circumstances are going to change and how our need for different kinds of people changes. At one time, we may need very individualistic and aggressive people. At another time, we may need very cooperative, team-working people. At another time, we may need people who are full of interest in dexterous manipulation of the external world. At another time, we may need people who explore into their own psychology and are introspective. There is no knowing. But the more varieties and the more skills we have, obviously, the better. So you see, here again, the problem comes out in genetics. We do not really know how to interfere with the way the world is. Is a very complexly interrelated organism. And if you look at the body in a superficial way, you may see there's something wrong with it. It's chickenpox. And there's spots that itch. You might say, well, the spots are there, cut them off. So you kill the bug. Well, then you find you've got a real problem. Because you have to introduce some bugs to kill the bug. It's like bringing rabbits into Australia. And that starts going all over the place and getting out of it. Then you think, well, now wait a minute. It wasn't the bugs in the blood. There are bugs all over the place. What was wrong with this person? That his blood system suddenly became vulnerable to those particular bugs. His resistance wasn't up. Therefore, what you should have given was not an antibiotic, but vitamins. Okay, so we're going to build up his resistance. But resistance to what? You may build up resistance to this and this and this class of bugs, but then there's another one that loves that situation. It comes right in. The way the world actually is an enormously complex, interrelated organism. The way the world actually is an enormously complex, interrelated organism. See, we always look at the human being medically in bits and pieces because we have heart specialists, lung specialists, bone specialists, nerve specialists, and so on. And so on. And they each see the human being from their point of view. There are a few generalists, but they realize the human body is so complicated that no one mind can understand it. And furthermore, supposing we do succeed in healing all these people of their diseases, what do we then do about the population problem? I mean, we've stopped cholera, the black bubonic plague, we're getting the better of tuberculosis, we may fix cancer and heart disease. Then what will people die of? Well, then let's go on living. There'll be enormous quantities of it. Then we have to fix this birth thing. Pills for everybody. Then we find what are the effects, the side effects of those pills? What are the psychological effects upon men and women of not breeding children in the usual way? We don't know. 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 The way the world actually is an enormously complex, interrelated organism. The way the world actually is an enormously complex, interrelated organism.
Akira.
He's got clout.
And what seems a good thing today turns out tomorrow to have been a disaster. What seemed in the moral and spiritual sphere too, like great virtues in times past, are easily seen today as hideous evil. Let's take, for example, the Inquisition.
In its own day, among Catholics, the Holy Inquisition was regarded as we today regard the practice of psychiatry. You see, you feel that in curing a person of cancer, almost anything is justified. The most complex operation, the most weird surgery, people suspended for days and days on the end of tubes, with X-ray penetration, burning. People undergoing shock treatment, people locked in the colorless, monotonous corridors, mental institutions. In all good faith, they knew that witchcraft and heresy were terrible things, awful plagues, imperiling people's souls forever and ever. So any means were justified to cure people of heresy. We don't change. We don't change. We're doing the same thing today, but under different names. We don't change. see how evil that was. But we can't see it in ourselves. So therefore, beware of virtue. We don't. We're doing the same thing today, but under different names. We don't. We're doing the same thing today, under different names. We don't.